All right, this evening's Daf Yomi is, the week's Daf Yomi, sponsored by Rabbi and Evelyn Kislasi, Li'uli Nishmas Reb Aaron's grandfather, Aaron ben Shimon, whose yortzeit is the 8th of Iyar, and B'schus Refuah Shema for Yaakov ben Dina Chedva. We are on today's Daf Daled and Aleph. We are at Michti, 4 lines from the top. What we were discussing is we were trying to take a look. Our Mishnah has, we were trying to figure out whether our Mishnah followed Rabbi Yishmael's opinion, Rabbi Akiva's opinion, and it was difficult to interpret the Mishnah either way. We are currently under the presumption that the Mishnah is according to Rabbi Yishmael's opinion, right? The Rabbi Yishmael holds that and the problem that we had with Rabbi Yishmael's opinion was that when it comes to these oaths that a person is making, he holds that you only bring a korban olav yored for oaths in the future tense, not in the past tense. Problem is that our Mishnah said that you are liable in cases of future tense and past tense. So how can you answer that in order to make that consistent? How can the Mishnah say that you're liable both in future tense and past tense oaths? And Rabbi Yishmael is holding only the future tense oaths. So the answer we gave was, we weren't talking about the korban olav yored. We are talking about malchus. You can get lashes for it. And we said that means that Rabbi Yishmael is saying that if you swear for the future, you get lashes. If you swear in the past, you get lashes. And we pointed out that implies that Rabbi Yishmael was holding that you can get malchus for a lav shein bo ma'aseh. You can get malchus for a prohibition where there is no action. Hi.
Haven't seen him.
If you see him, can you have him text us, either me or the rabbi? Okay,
Got
thank you so much.
No problem.
So, because a oath that you will do something, that you will eat, but then you don't actually eat it, doesn't have any action in violation because you didn't eat, right? So now, and the oath is just speech.
Right.
So therefore, we then suggested that the problem with that answer is that it creates a disagreement within Rabbi Yochanan himself. How so? Because Rabbi Yochanan holds like a stam Mishnah. What does that mean? That means when a Mishnah's opinion, when there's no opinion listed, so then we hold that Rabbi Yochanan says the halacha is like that. So that means Rabbi Yochanan holds like that. Our Mishnah does not label it as belonging to anybody's opinion. So that means that Rabbi Yochanan should be agreeing with our Mishnah. Our Mishnah is saying that a lav shein bo ma'aseh, that has a losa say that has no action, you're going to get lashes for it. But then we have another statement about Rabbi Yochanan, where Rabbi Yochanan argues with Reish Lakish, and he explains that the reason why, if you have meat from a sacrifice that gets left over till the next day, you don't get lashes for it, is because it's a lav shein bo ma'aseh, there's no action. There we see Rabbi Yochanan clearly says, a lav shein bo ma'aseh, you don't get lashes. So how could he hold both of those things simultaneously? So the answer we are giving is that Rabbi Yochanan found a different stam Mishnah. So therefore, he had a choice. He could hold that means a Mishnah with no opinion label, with no label.
On its own.
That's correct. Doesn't list Rabbi so and so says. Nobody's anonymous, right? Anonymous. Okay. So that's what's going on here. And so then we quoted this plain Mishnah, right? We said that a shvuah that a person says that he will not eat this, that he will not eat this loaf, or a shvuah that he will, and then shvuah shelo ochlena ve'achla, and then he does eat it. Eino chayv, he's not ela achas, because that's a shvuah's bitoy that you're getting malchus. Rasha's korban over yored zuhi dechayav al zdur malchus aval ochel. But if he makes the oath where he says, I'm going to eat it, and he doesn't, then he doesn't get lashes. So therefore, we have a different brisa, it's a Mishnah, right? We have a different Mishnah that seems to say that for that future tense oath, the very same one in our Mishnah that says you do get lashes for, you don't. Okay, so that's what we were up to. Now we're at Michti, 4 lines down. So Michti. So what we're suggesting is, the reason why we're going to acknowledge our Mishnah, which holds like Rabbi Yishmael, contradicts Rabbi Yochanan's own view. And we said that's okay because even though our Mishnah is a stam Mishnah, Rabbi Yochanan is following a different stam Mishnah, which we're going to see later on. in Daf Chaf Zayin, I believe, is where it comes up. But high stama v'high stama. If you've got two anonymous mishnayos, one here and one later on, so my chazi da'avid ki high stama. Why would Rabbi Yochanan decide that the halacha is like the second one? Li'avid ki high stama. Why isn't he deciding the halacha is like the first one? Right? So he has choice. So the question is, u'tamech, your question is a good one, but why ask it on Rabbi Yochanan? Gufei, was Rabbi Gufei. Hechi stam lon, ahacha, hachi, v'hacha, hachi. How did Rabbi, when he authored the Mishnayos, author one where he writes a plain anonymous viewpoint in one Mishnah, and then in another Mishnah, he writes the opposite viewpoint? Rabbi is contradicting himself. So forget Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi, who wrote the Mishnayos, is contradicting himself.
How can you contradict yourself? If you need someone else to contradict you.
That's what he's writing two different opinions. So how can he do that? So the answer is, Ella, what's happening is, here's how you can contradict yourself. Meikara savar lav shem b'maiset lokanav. At first, Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi was of the opinion that a lo saseh, that has no action, you do get malchus for it. And that's when he wrote the Mishnah at the beginning of her Masechta. Ustama, and that's when he wrote it like that. The Hadar, then he changed his mind. The Hadar savar ein lokan alav. He changed his mind and he wrote another Mishnah that says that you don't get malchus on it. Ustama, Mishnah, Ustama, and then he wrote a Mishnah like that. Mishnah lo zazam imkoma, but he never went back and re-edited the original Mishnah. Why? Because when those texts were being created, they were being created for memorization. Once the texts got disseminated, it was a complicated thing to go back and change the texts. So therefore, he left it. So yes, the Mishnayos contradict themselves. But Rebbe, the first Mishnah that's in our Masechta, represents Rebbe's original opinion. Later on, he changes his mind. And Rabbi Yochanan follows the one that's later on because that's when Rebbe changes his mind. Okay, so now, B'mayu Kimta, let's go back to how we resolved our Mishnah. We resolved our Mishnah to be Rabbi Yishmael Ulamalkus. Okay, so Rabbi Yishmael, we decided that our Mishnah is going that all of these opinions are that everybody's liable to lashes, right? Because we said by Shevuos it has to be lashes. And it's like Rabbi Yishmael, because he holds that Alav Shem Pamais, you're going to get malchus for it. That's how we established the Mishnah. Problem is, the next case in the Mishnah is Maros Negoyim. When you see the tzaras. So my malchus ikka. So when you see tzaras, what happens? So remember Parsha a couple weeks ago, you get tzaras, you go out of the camp, you're tameh, you bring a sacrifice. when you bring a sacrifice, so then what's the malchus? There's no malchus involved in tzaras, right? It's not the thing. So the answer is bekotzeitz baharto. The answer is that if somebody has one of these afflictions of tzaras, what if he cuts it off, right? Let's say he goes and decides he want to get surgery, right, and have it removed.
But not allowed to do it.
Not allowed to do that. And if you do that, you get malchus. So that's how you can get malchus when it comes to Nagayim. Okay. Look, Rabbi Abin, it's like Rabbi Abin says, I'm Rabbi Yillah, in the name of Rabbi Yillah. Dam Rabbi Abin, I'm Rabbi Yillah. Rabbi Abin said in the name of Rabbi Yillah, Kol mokum shenamar hishamer pen va'al, eno elo lo saseh. Whenever in the Torah you see the words hishamer, guard against, pen, lest, and al, and don't, that's a lo saseh, right? You don't have to have the words lo, don't do this. It can be any of these phrases too. So therefore, when the pasuk says that you're not allowed to, or guard hishamer, you should guard your wound of negayim. So then, right, the pasuk says hishamer b'nega tzaras, that you're supposed to guard the tzaras. It's a lo saseh, and the lo saseh is don't cut it off, and therefore, if you do, you get malchus. Okay, how about Yitzias Shabbos? My malchus ikka.
But did you get warned?
So you have to get warned, and you have to get right. Like all the cases of malchus, you need warning, and you need two witnesses. Now, the third case in our Mishnah. What about that one? What about Yitzias Shabbos? How about carrying on Shabbos? My malchus ikka. Where's the malchus in Yitzias Shabbos? We know that if you violate Shabbos, the punishment is skila, right? Stoning.
This is before they had the Arabs, right?
Without it, well, this is even worse with an Eruv or without an Eruv. This is really Deoraisa level Rishus HaRabim and Rishus HaYachid, right? When we get to Eruvin, we'll discuss the Eruvs and things. But yeah, no Eruvs. So where's the malchus? So the answer is Lav Shenitin Laws Haras Misas Basin. Who? This is a lo saseh, where the punishment is the lo saseh, which leads to a punishment of Basin killing you, right? The chol lav shnitin las hars misas Basin ain't loken alav. And if Basin is going to give you the death penalty, you don't get malchus for it. So where's the malchus there? So the answer is Mishum Hachi Komo Kimna Rabbi Yishmael. He says, no problem. Remember that we were following Rabbi Yishmael's viewpoint. And if you will remember back a couple weeks, Rabbi Yishmael in Maseches Makos had an argument with Rabbi Akiva. To Amar, he said, Lav Shenitan Las Horas Misas based in Lokin Alav. If you have a losase that you're supposed to get malchus for, and the witnesses come along and warn you instead that you're going to get malchus for it instead of misa, that you get the malchus. So therefore, we come up with a circumstance in our Mishnah that you could be liable for malchus.
This way, malchus would be worse.
Huh?
This way, malchus would
No,
be worse.
misa is always worse, right? Misa is worse, right? But we're saying that you can get the malchus instead of the misa, right? It's not an issue of kamlei b'derabimine, if that's your point, right? In other words, kamlei b'derabimine, though you give the worst punishment, but we're saying that since the warning wasn't given properly, that's what disqualifies the death penalty. Okay? So now, ha lav hachi kaima karebi akiva. So without that, right? So then we would have established the Mishnah like Rabbi Akiva, right? What you just said, that it's that without this point, you said we have to establish our Mishnah like Rabbi Yishmael, right? But one second, if we establish, in other words, the rest of the Mishnah could flow according to Rabbi Akiva, but the fact that this we need to be able to establish that you can get malchus for carrying on Shabbos makes it like Rabbi Yishmael. But how can you establish that? We're going to see that there are other areas of this Mishnah that don't go like Rabbi Akiva either. So he says, what a kashi yedios. So we said, what about the issue of being the awarenesses, right? That we're going to, that Rabbi Akiva's of the position that you can't be in violation. The prohibition of being aware of your tumah and coming in and becoming tameh only applies if the person isn't aware of his tumah, not if the person is aware of his tumah, but he's not aware of that he's in the place that's Beis Hamikdash or the korban is that he's dealing with the korban.
So basically, going to the place when you're not aware of the tumah until you're without you, it can be a problem, can't it?
If you go to the place of the Beis Hamikdash while you're tameh, it's a big problem.
Even without your knowledge.
Even without your knowledge. That's correct. Yes. So now this is what we said. So therefore, how would we understand our Mishnah? Because Rabbi Akiva wouldn't hold you liable for all of these cases as Yediyas Hatuma, because of the way that he understands the pasuk. When Rabbi Akiva learns the pasuk, we'll hopefully go into some detail in it later on. I think we go through this pasuk later on, but that the way he interprets the pasuk, he says that the requirement that he learns that the pasuk basically says that it's Parak Hey pasuk base. Let's take a look at this pasuk right here. Yeah, let's do this right. Wow, no shortcuts. It's a short page. We do it right. Hang on, Parak.
On the side, isn't it?
Vayikra Parak Hey. I don't know if they quote it on the side. Yes, they do. Oh, perfect. It is on the side. Okay, that's what it says on the side. Ibn nefesh asher tiga b'chol davar tamei o benivlas chaya tameya. Right. If any person who touches anything which is tamei, or the nevelas chaya tameya, or the nevela that's tamei, o benivlas behema tameya, o benivlas sheretz. It's a list of all the tuma. Venela mimenu, and it becomes hidden from him. Vehu tamei, and then he's tamei ve'ashem. Then the pasuk says, O ki yiga betumas adam lechol tumaso, or he's got some sort of tumah of a person that he becomes tamei, and then the last part of the pasuk, v'nela mimenu, and it becomes hidden from him. Vehu yadan, he knows about it. V'ashem. That last section of v'nela mimenu vehu yada, it is hidden from him, and he becomes aware, is extra, not necessary. Why? Because of course you wouldn't bring up korban if you didn't know. If you didn't know you didn't have error, you didn't be bringing anything. You have to obviously know about it. So therefore, what Rabbi Akiva says is, you look at this. The pasuk, the first part of the pasuk is telling me that if the issue is that you forgot that you are tamei, that's the pasuk says, you are a person that you are tamei, and right, you forgot that.
How can you forget your tummy if you
forgot?
It's noticeable.
Tuma's not noticeable. Somebody, no, not tzaras. Tummy, he touches something that's tummy, so now he's tummy, right?
Once he's in once he's in the
so now he's now tummy. He forgets that, and he goes to the Beis Hamikdash.
Yeah.
Okay, so or he eats Kodesh. Now he knows he's in the Beis Hamikdash and he knows he's eating Kodesh. The thing that he forgot is that he's tummy. That's how the pasuk is.
Yeah.
Then the pasuk goes on and says, it means that, well, that's extra. So therefore what he says is, since that's extra, take the word velo yada, that he doesn't know, put that at the beginning, and we have to be able to say that here's what happens. He needs to first have been aware of his tumah, then forget about it, and then become aware of it again. That's the circumstance where you have to bring your korban olav yored. Okay, you have to first know that you were tamei. Then, in other words, if you wind up with a situation that you never knew that you became tamei, and then you went to the Beis Hamikdash, and then you found out later, that's not a korban olav yored. This is only I knew I was tamei, and then I forgot about it, and then I became tamei, and then and I forgot about it, and then I realized it again. Okay, so that's how Rabbi Akiva learns this pasuk. There's nothing in the pasuk that tells me that if I know I'm tamei, but I didn't know this was a korban, or I know I'm tamei and I didn't know I was in the Beis Hamikdash area, that's not in the pasuk, according to Rabbi Akiva. According to the other opinions, Rabbi Yishmael, he learns it not like that. Rabbi Yishmael says, no, you can become liable for all of those cases. For 4 cases, I could forget that I am tamei and go into the Beis Hamikdash. I could forget that I'm tamei and eat hektish. I could remember that I'm tamei and forget that it's hektish, and I could remember that I'm tamei and forget that I'm in the Beis Hamikdash. But Rabbi Akiva says two of those circumstances I'm not liable for. Okay, so that's good. So now, if that's true, then how are you going to kasha yedius? You would have a problem with Rabbi Akiva because Rabbi Akiva doesn't hold that you're going to be liable for punishment for 2 of those circumstances. So the answer is lavamart Rabbi Yishmael he ulamalkus. So we already explained that this is Rabbi Yishmael's opinion. And as far as Rabbi Yishmael, and we said that it's a malchus issue, so we're good. We've already solved that problem. So Rabbi Akiva nami ulamalkus. So Rabbi Akiva nami ulamalkus. So we could say it's Rabbi Akiva's opinion also. And Rabbi Akiva, then we could say it's a malchus issue, right? So Rabbi Akiva, it's going to be a malchus issue. So you might not be liable for a korban olav yored because you didn't satisfy the conditions of the pasuk, but you violated a los haseh, in which case you can get malchus. So the problem is, ihachi, if that's so, yedius, the word yedius is the wrong word to use in the Mishnah. The word yedius means that you found out about your impurity, your tumah. But that's not what happened. It's hasros mibayle. It should be, in order to get malchus, you have to get warned, which means that these are the circumstances where you got warned that you were tamei and you violated the prohibition anyway, and therefore you got malchus. Not that I became aware. It's the wrong word. So therefore, halokash, that's not such a big question. Tani yedius de hasros. What we mean is you became aware that you were warned. So the Mishnah doesn't use the way I understand that is the Mishnah is not using a precise word, but it's not that terrible. It doesn't contradict the meaning of it. You became aware that you got warned. Okay. But now here's the problem. Shtayim shein arba tartihu dahavyun. If you're talking about on purpose, you don't have 4 cases anymore. Because let's review. How did we get 4 cases? 4 cases was that I could remember I'm tamei and forget about the Beis Hamikdash. I could remember I'm tamei and forget about hektish. I could forget about my tumah. I could forget about my tumah and go to the Beis Hamikdash, forget about my tumah and show up and eat the hektish. If I'm getting warned, that means somebody's telling me something. Well, if I'm being warned, then there's no such thing as forgetting anything. So that means I know I'm tamei because the guy just told me he's tamei. So that means if I know that, there's only 2 circumstances that I could get malchus. I could know I'm tamei and eat hektish, or I could know I'm tamei and walk into the Beis Hamikdash. But there's no corresponding other variable, right? There's only one variable, hektish or the Beis Hamikdash. The other variable about me is not a variable because I'm literally being told right now. Otherwise, how are you getting a warning and getting lashes? So where do you see 2 that are 4? I've only got 2 cases. Does that make sense? Okay.
Somewhat.
Okay. Should I say it again? We'll go. Okay. Watch the video.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So that's correct. Okay. So
it could be warned and then talk to his friends, whatever.
Well, then he's forgotten again. But then it's not a hasra. The hasra has to be immediately before, right? Okay. So then, the 2, and furthermore, es sheyesh ba yedia batchila veyedia basof vehelim ben asayim. So it says in the Mishnah says that you need a circumstance where you knew at the beginning, and then you knew at the end, and you forgot in the middle. Halama lemalkus maya videte. Well, you can't forget anything if malchus is involved. Malchus has to be you got warned and you knew the whole thing. The 2, and furthermore, we got another problem with your explanation. Hareze be'ola v'yored. The Mishnah literally says, right? Go back to the Mishnah. The Mishnah's wording was that if you forget, you get an ola v'yored, right? He says that es sheyesh bo yadia batchil v'yadia basof v'halam beinasayim hareze be'ola v'yored. You're going to have to bring the korban ola v'yored. And now you're telling me it's about Malchus, then we're bringing the korban ola v'yored in. Ella Amar Rav Yosef. So Rav Yosef says this whole explanation that we've been trying to fit our Mishnah according to Rabbi Shmuel. Okay, forget that. We'll try again. Amar Rav Yosef. So Rav Yosef says here's the way that we're going to explain our Mishnah. Rebbe he. Okay, it's all Rebbe's opinion. So the bottom line is that Rebbe takes certain elements of Rabbi Yishmael's viewpoints and certain elements of Rabbi Akiva's viewpoints, and he combines them together. He holds like Rabbi Yishmael here, and he holds like Rabbi Akiva there, and that's how the whole Mishnah works. Okay, but Nasiv La Aliba de Tanai, right? He establishes our Mishnah to go according to this argument, according to the one opinion and one. Obi Adias, right? When it comes to the Nasiv La Aliba de Tanai, be Yedius Nasiv La Rabbi Yishmael. When it comes to Yedius, being aware of the Tumah or not being aware of the Tumah, he holds like Rabbi Yishmael, right? And so therefore Rabbi Yishmael holds that you're going to be liable for the korban ola v'yored in all four circumstances. So Rabbi Akiva doesn't learn the pasuk that way, but Rabbi Yishmael does. So when he says korban ola v'yored is in four circumstances, he's holding Rabbi Yishmael. And b'Shvuos, when it comes to the oaths, which we said, according to Rabbi Yishmael, you're only going to get, you can't be chayav for one of for the past tense, only for the future tense. Nasiv like Rabbi Akiva, he holds like Rabbi Akiva, who says that you're going to be chayav in all four of those types. Hi, Amar Rav Ashi. So okay, so that's what's going on. So that's the answer. That's Rebbe. It's Rebbe's opinion. He takes a bit of Rabbi Yishmael, he takes a bit of Rabbi Akiva, and he puts them. It's a smash up, and he winds up with having a version of the Mishnah which is partially according to one and partially according to the other. So Amar Rav Ashi. Rav Ashi says, "Amrisa l'shmasa coming to Rav Kahana." So I told this explanation of the Mishnah to Rav Kahana. Va'amar li, he said, "Lo teima Rebbe nesiv lo aliba de tanai v'lei lo svirale." The way you can't say that what Rebbe's doing is that he's picking Rabbi Yishmael's viewpoint and he's picking Rabbi Akiva's viewpoint. What you should say is that Rebbe established his own viewpoints. Rebbe's own viewpoint was, right, Ella Rebbe ta'amei denafshei mefarish. Rebbe's giving his own perspective, right? Sometimes he holds like one opinion, sometimes he holds like the others, but it's not that he took the Mishnah and he grabbed half an opinion here and half an opinion here. That's not the way to say it. You should say it's Rebbe, and he's consistent as himself. Did Tanya, we learn in Brisa.
Rav kind of proves his contention.
Right, he's going to prove it from a Brisa. How do we know that you are going to be liable for this korban ola v'yored? If you know at the beginning that you were tamei, then you forgot in the middle, and then you find out at the end. Talmud Lomar, therefore the pasuk says, V'ne'elam shnei pamim. The word v'ne'elam, as we read that pasuk that we saw on the side, 2 times. Okay, Divrei Rabbi Akiva. That's what Rabbi Akiva says. I need to be able to, as Rabbi Akiva interprets it, it tells me that I need to know, forget, and then know again. But I also korban ola v'yored only applies to circumstances where I forget about my own tumah, not where I know about my tumah, but I forget about the Beis Hamikdash or the Hekdesh. Rabbi Omer einot tzarich. Rabbi says, I don't need a pasuk for that. Harei hu omer, because the pasuk says, Dalet Amavez, v'ne'elam, right, that he forgot about it. Well, Mikal diyoda. If you forgot about something, that means you knew about it first. You can't forget about something you didn't already know. So therefore, the word v'ne'elam already implies I knew about it and then I forgot about it. Right? So therefore, that's not necessary. V'hu yada, and then it's he knows, so that's extra. So what does the word v'hu yada mean according to him? So harei kan shtei yedios. It's 2 circumstances where you could find out that about something you forgot about. What are the 2 circumstances?
Torah.
Both the circumstance where you knew that you were tamei or not, and the circumstance where you know about the tumah, the Beis Hamikdash, or the korban. Right? So im kain. So matam lomer v'ne'elam. Okay, so everything is good. Great answer, pasuk. Why does the word v'ne'elam listed twice? Right? So lechayev al helam tumah v'al migdash, because it's telling me both that you're going to bring a korban ola v'yored if you forget about the tumah of the person and if you forgot the tumah of the place or korban. So therefore, that's how Rabbi Yishmael learns the pasuk, arguing between Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Akiva, and so therefore he's going to hold, right? So therefore, he holds like one of those viewpoints.
What punishment if you go into the base of Mikdash, you make one of the equipment tummy in there?
If you are tummy and you go into the base of Mikdash, you're bringing
the equipment.
So again, like we said, first of all, well, making something tummy is the same issue of walking in there in the first place, right? If you knew about it, forgot about it, and you knew about it again, then you're going to bring a korban olavio rate. If you were warned, you can get malchus for it. Okay. Ashkechan b'yedios de'islay ta'ama denafshe. Okay, so I understand where you can see how Rebbe holds when it comes to this yedios. He's got this two-way argument between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Shmuel, and he's picking the way that he holds. Shevuos de'islay ta'amei denafshe minolan. How do you know that Rebbe also has an opinion when it comes to Shevuos? So Savarahu, that's logical. There's a logic there. Now, before we get into the logic of Shevuos, why you're going to be liable to the korban olavio rate in the past tense and in the future tense, we're going to interrupt for a moment. Rabbi Akiva, my time kamechayev l'sha'avar. Why is it? Why Rabbi Akiva holds that you are liable for past tense, not just future tense like Rabbi Shmuel holds? Dedarsh ribuye umiyute, because we have a concept of a riboy and a miut, the riboy and the miut. We have when we have in the Torah pasuk that starts off with a generality and then it comes with something specific afterwards, and then another generality afterwards. We have a disagreement of what's our approach to that. Okay, so let's just take a made up example, right? Somebody says you should drive to work. Okay, then it says in there that it says on a bicycle. Okay, then afterwards it says or any red thing that you want. Okay, so now what happens? So according to the opinion that says it's riboy umiut to riboy, so you should drive to work. That's your generality. On a bicycle is a very specific item. So what does that look like to me? That means that I am going to limit what I can ride to work on to things that are not like bicycles in some kind of a way, right? Those things are out, things that are not like bicycles. But then I have a generality again to tell me I'm only going to eliminate one thing that's not like a bicycle, right? I shouldn't ride to work on a hoverboard. Why? Because bicycles have wheels. So therefore, if something doesn't have wheels, but that means I'm going to still include skateboards and roller skates and all those and mopeds and all of those other things are still going to be included. Okay. If I learn this as a klal uprat uklal, so then the bicycle is very specific. I'm going to eliminate everything other than bicycles. Then I got a generality which is going to come to include one more thing. Okay. So now what's the thing that's most similar to bicycles? I don't know. Motorcycles also. We'll include those two. So I've got my generality, my specific, and my generality again comes to only add one more thing in. If you hold of riboy miut v'riboy, you're going to include many more items in that which is included versus the klal uprat uklal people. Okay, so let's see how that works. Rabbi Akiva, my time kamechayev. Rabbi Akiva, why does he hold backwards? So he says like this. Dedarish riboy umiut. So we have this pasuk. Pasuk says, "O nefesh kisi shava libate b'sfasayim." Any person who takes an oath, lehara'u lehetev, right? Whether it's for positive or for negative, l'chol asher yibate ha'adam b'shvua. Anything that a person swears in an oath. Okay, so here's how the riboy umiut works. Nefesh kisi shava, a person who swears, that's any type of oath, forwards, backwards, future tense, past tense, anything, right? That's the riboy. Then it says lehara'u lehetev, positive or negative. That's a limiter, okay? So that means only oaths that are similar to that, right? Those are future tense oaths. So that's going to only include future tense oaths. Then it says, ulechol asher yivate adam, anything that the person is going to vow for. So that's going to include other things. So now, if you hold riboy umiut, so then Rabbi Akiva is going to say it's going to add on also past tense. Right? Because I didn't only include the future tense, I included also the past tense. What is excluded, remember, we're only going to exclude one thing. We are going to exclude that if somebody swears to not do a mitzvah. That's the one time that this pasuk doesn't apply. If somebody swears to not do a mitzvah, you're not going to bring this korban olavio rate. That's not going to be, because the shvua doesn't work. It's a different prohibition. Okay? So then, right, Rebbe, so there's no Ma'ariv because they had a Shiva house.
All right.
Back tomorrow. Back tomorrow. Okay, so that's the concept of riboy umiut. If you hold of klal uprat uklal, okay, then the way that you look at this is you are going to swear any oath. Then it says these two future tense, these two types, lara le'etev. Then it comes with another generality. I'm only going to include all types of future tense oaths. I'm going to eliminate the past tense oaths. So therefore, right, so that's the disagreement. According to Rabbi Akiva, he includes in this prohibition the past tense oaths, and Rabbi Yishmael does not. Okay, so now we're going to see that Rebbe Nami Darsh Riboy Umiyute. Rebbe also holds, like Rabbi Akiva, of this practice of looking at psukim with a Riboy Umiyut approach. And since he looks at these psukim in the Riboy Umiyut approach, he's going to agree with Rabbi Akiva that you're going to include the future tense oaths and the past tense oaths. And that's why, okay, so now we're going to be consistent. That's why back to the Mishnah. The Mishnah, Rebbe is going to hold like Rabbi Yishmael when it comes to the Tuma, but he's going to hold like Rabbi Akiva when it comes to the oaths. Okay, so great. Titania, we learned in a brisa. How do we know Rebbe holds of this ribuy umiyut? Here's another brisa, another circumstance, and Rebbe's going to come out specifically holding like ribuy umiyut. Rebbe Omer, bechol podin bechor adam chutz min hashtaros. When a person goes to redeem his firstborn son, you have to pay with 5 shekel. Well, let's say you don't have 5 shekel. So Rebbe says you can pay with anything that's worth 5 shekel. The only thing that you can't do is pay by check, right? You can't have a written document that says you can collect $5 and use that, right? So a person cannot write a check for his pigeon aben. That's clear, you can't do that. But you can, use a piece of silver, you can use a Kahal Yereim mug, whatever is valuable, and use that as your pigeon aben. The Rabbanan disagree. Bechol podin bechor adam chutz me avadim usharos vekarkos. That you can redeem a person with anything except when it comes to slaves, contract, and land. So what's the argument based on? What's the disagreement on this? My time at the Rebbe. Why is Rebbe hold this way? Because Darsh Riboy Umiyute. He learns the pasuk about redeeming firstborn sons in this style of Riboy Umiyut. And he goes like this. Updu yav, when you redeem him, mi ben chodesh, from the month. That means you can redeem him any way that you want, with anything, as long as he's a month old. That's the riba, that's the generality. Be'erkecha kesef chamesha shkolim, with the value of 5 shkolim, that's the limitation, that's the miyut. Tipadeh, you shall redeem him, that goes back and makes the generality. Chazav riba. Riba umiyat v'riba, so we have a generality, a specificity, and a generality again. Riba hakol, so it's going to tell me everything is included again, except for one thing that's not like the money. And what is that? My riba, kol mili, it's going to include everything. Umay miyut, what's the one thing that it's going to come to exclude? Miyut shtaris, we're going to exclude written documents because they have no value. So they have no value, that's what's excluded. That's how he learns the pasuk. Ve'Rabbanan, the Rabbanan who disagree with Rebbe, they darshik kol prati. They learn this is a kol pratu klal. Upduyav bi ben chodesh klal be'erkecha bekesef chamesh shkolim is the prat, and tipodeh chazer klal. This is the beginning. He says it's the klal, then a prat, and then a klal. Here's how it works. Klal pratu klal iyatodan elkein a prat. That you only can learn that those things that are specifically like the middle specificity are going to be included. You're going to include money and things that are worth money, but nothing else. Mahaprat mefurish davar metalto, but it's also going to be something, so it has to be similar to the money in that it is a movable item, the gufo mamon, and it has financial value. Afkol davar metalto, the gufo mamon. Therefore, it's going to mean you can only do a pigeon aben with something that's movable and something that's the value of money. What does that come to exclude? Yatsu karkos, land. Can't trade land for the firstborn. Now, according to Rebbe, you could. According to the Rabbanan, you can't. She'ein on metalton, because they're not movable property. Yatsu avadim, it's going to exclude slaves. Why? Shehukshu karkos, because slaves have the same rules as land, and so therefore they're not going to be able to be included either. Yatsu shtaros, and also contracts, they're going to agree. Contracts can't be used. Why? Afapisha metalton, even though they're movable, in gufan mamon, they have no intrinsic value. Right? They have a value that you can use to collect with it, but their value, the item itself, is just a piece of paper. So it has no intrinsic value. Okay? So that proves that Rebbe holds of ribuy umiyut to ribuy, which is just like Rabbi Akiva, which means that he's going to hold that when it comes to Shevuos in the future tense and Shevuos in the past tense are going to be liable. So that's how he learns the Mishnah. Amar le Ravina la Amemar. So Ravina says to Amemar, Rebbe Darsh Ribu Yomute. Are you telling me Rebbe learns Ribu Yomut? I'll show you he doesn't. Rebbe Kal Prati Darsh. I think that Rebbe learns Kal Prat. I'll show you another place where Rebbe gives his opinion, and it sounds like Rebbe's holding Kal Prat. The Tanya's going to Brisa. Martseya, right? We're talking about a Eved Ivri, and he wants to stay with his master. So what do? You take him, and you put him up against the doorpost, and you put a Martseya, a awl, A-W-L, right? And you put...
It was like an earring.
It is a piece, it is a tool that is pointy and metal at the end, okay? And what it's used for in woodworking is that you put a hole into a piece of wood in order to be able to hammer a nail or put a screw in, right? It makes a mark and puts a hole where the hole's supposed to go. But we're using it to pierce somebody's ear. Okay, so Martseya, you're supposed to, the Pasuk says you're using Martseya in all. Ainli ela Martseya, that only means that I'm only allowed to use an all. Minayin lerabos hasol v'asirva hamachat v'mekadeach v'hamichtav. I'm not even sure I think I looked up in the art school what all these things were. I'm not even sure what all of that. What about if I want to...
Needle, gimlet, or stylus?
Yeah, so a thistle, a thorn, a needle, those I know what those are. And then the mekadeach is a gimlet, which I Googled, and it turns out it's a type of cocktail made from gin and lime. So I don't think that's what it means. So I don't... The different gimlets. Right? I was tempted, though, to see if it worked, but no. So, but it's some other kind of pointy object, obviously, and a michtav, which is a stylus. That was a pointy wooden object used to carve onto a piece of softer wood so that you could make markings. Tam and Lomar, therefore the pasuk says, the lakachta, what is it? The lakachta, you're supposed to take. So that means kol davar she nilkach biyad, anything that's taken in your hand, right? The pasuk says v'lakachta, so you take anything, as a martseya, the all, then asata belzno, and you put it. So anything that you could take and put, those are your riboy, and you have your mute in the middle. So we're going to exclude those items that are not at all similar, right? So he says that means I'm going to include all kinds of pointy items, right? Because he's going to learn, because Rabbi Yossi is going to read Boyamiyut, right? Rabbi Yossi, that's different. Rabbi Yossi Yehuda. Rabbi Omer, now Rabbi, he should be holding Rabbi Yomiyut. He should be including all these things. But he doesn't. He says Martseya. He says Martseya is an all. Ma Martseya miyuchad shel matechas, just like a Martseya is a metal utensil. Afkol shel matechas. You can only use metal utensils for this purpose, for this mitzvah. So now, Vamrina, we said the Maikamafki. What are they arguing about? Rebbe Darish Kalayu Prate. Rebbe must be learning Klal Prat. That's why he only allows you to use the one type of item, the one type of pointy item, the metal pointy item. The Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, Darish Ribuye Umiyute, and Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda is the one who's holding Ribuye Umiyute because he includes all these other type of pointy items. So the answer is you're right. That does seem to be Rebbe's opinion here. Biyama Kalayu Prati Darish. You're right. Rebbe, generally speaking, does learn Klal Prat. However, v'hacha hainu taima. Here's the reason why this is an exception. Why he holds this is Rabbi Yomiyut. Kidatana debe Rabbi Shmuel, like we're in a brisa from Rabbi Shmuel. Kidatana debe Rabbi Shmuel. The mayim shnei pamim. So he says that if you have this pasuk, which is talking about eating bugs that are in water, right? Pasuk says, this is what you can eat from water. Anything that has fins and scales, b'mayim, in water, by yamim ubenachalim, in the rivers and in the streams, those you can eat. Okay, which means that if you've got little bugs in the water that don't have fins and scales, those are not kosher. Okay, so now, why does it say b'mayim twice? Ein ze klal prat. That's not a klal prat. That ella riba umiyat. This is an example of a riboy umiyat. Why? Because b'mayim is written one after the other, I believe is how that works. 1 second, how that works. Rashi says,
that was called a Gezer Shava.
No, this is not Exer Shava. This is it's a b'mayim. You're right. It sounds when they say b'mayim, you're thinking it is. But we're saying that this actually is b'mayim because the word is used in the pasuk twice. It's used b'mayim twice. Yes. Say b'mayim shnei pa'amim because it says pasuk says as zet tochlu mikosher b'mayim kosher because is b'mayim. So therefore, the generality of b'mayim, and then it says afterwards again b'mayim. Then so this is what it is. Right. First it says anything in the water that has fins and scales. Then it says in the water again, and then the specific of in the rivers or in the streams is the specific, but it's not in the right order. When normally we had all of these cases that we've been quoting up until this point, we had a generality, a specific, and a generality. In this pasuk, we have the generality, and then the specific. Therefore, since this is out of order, even though generally speaking, you're going to learn a ribui umi, we're going to learn a klal prat when we have a general, specific, general. This case, since it's general, specific, it is considered to be a ribui umiut. And since the case of Shevuos is going to also look in that same style, also he says that's another example of an exception to the rule. Generally speaking, Rabbi holds of klal prat, but when you have the generality, and then the specific afterwards, that's going to be a ribui umiut. Okay, so that's how that works. The Rabbanan. Now the Rabbanan Amar Ravina K'da Amri B'Marava, and so Ravina says, like we said in Eretz Yisrael, Kamokum Shatem Motzei Shtei Klavos Hasmuchu Zel Hazeh. They hold differently than that. They say anytime that you have the two generalities written right next to each other, Hatel Prat Beinehem, just simply treat it like you treat all the other ones. Take the specific one and put it in between as though it's every other time. The Dunam B'Klal Prat, you consider it like a Klal Prat. So Rebbe doesn't use, when he says the generality, and then the specific, he doesn't call it a Klal Prat, he calls it a Ribui Umiut. But generally speaking, he holds of Klal Prat. Hashtadamar Rebbe Klali Prati Darish. So now that you've come to the conclusion that Rebbe holds of Klal Prat, that's the way he normally learns, he says, okay, then you have a contradiction. You have a problem with Rebbe when it comes to the oaths pasuk, because the oaths pasuk is a traditional looking pasuk. It says anything that you swear, then it gives lahara lahatev in the middle, and then it says anything that you swear again at the end. It's a generality, specific generality. It follows the classic order, in which case Rebbe should be using klal prat to klal. He shouldn't be using ribui umiut to ribui. Ella, so rather, why would Rebbe be holding by Shevuos that you're going to be liable for the retroactive ones also? Nesiv aliba, so he says el b'Shevuos, nesiv aliba de Rabbi Kiva v'lei lo svirale. Rather, what happens is that one he's just bringing Rabbi Akiva's opinion, and he himself doesn't hold that way. So remember what we had wanted to say when Rav Ashi had read this Mishnah. He said that, oh no, Rebbe's giving his own opinion. No, we've clearly proven that this is not Rebbe's own opinion. Rebbe simply taught a Mishnah, and he brought Rabbi Yishmael's opinion in one case and Rabbi Akiva's opinion in a different case. As difficult as that seems, why he would do such a thing, that's what he seems to have done. Okay, Gufa. Let's go on. We have another 15 minutes or so. Minayin she'eno chayav ela al sheyesh ba yediyah batchila v'yediyah basof v'helam bein asayim. When we talked about this korban olah v'yorei, okay? You can erase your mind on all of those. Go back and watch it if you can. It might take 4 or 5 minutes. It's a little bit of a complicated Gemara that we want to say. Okay, so now, where do we know, right, that you're going to be liable for the korban olah v'yorei if you have to have known about it first, forgotten about it, and then remembered afterwards? Talmud Lomar, as we said, Rabbi Akiva holds v'nelam shnei pa'amim. It says the word v'nelam twice. Therefore, you have to have forgotten it twice, right? You have to have forgotten it, which imply, and so it says forgotten it twice, which is unnecessary. So therefore, we take the word v'lo yada, that he knows about it, and put it at the beginning. He has to know about it, forget about it, and know about it again. Divrei Rabbi Akiva, that's how Rabbi Akiva words it. Rabbi Omer, Rabbi says, Eno tzarech, I don't need that because Harehu Omer v'nelam, once the pasuk says v'nelam in the first place, that you forgot about it, mikal sheyada, that means that you already knew about it first. Right? That's by definition. V'hu yada hare kan shtei yediyos. So when it says v'hu yada, he says it's talking about two different circumstances of forgetting, and that's why he says that unlike Rabbi Akiva, who only holds you responsible for korban olah v'yorei, if you forget your own tumah, he says you're also going to be liable for korban olah v'yorei if you remembered your own tumah, you forgot about the Beis Hamikdash or the korban. So im kain, so if that's true, matam lo v'nelam, what are we doing with this word v'nelam? L'chayev ha'le'em tumah v'alem mikdash, in order to tell me that you're going to be chayev, as we said, for both when you remember your own tumah, but you forgot about the tumah of the korban or of the Beis Hamikdash. That was the gufa that we had mentioned that before. Amar Mar. Okay, so Mar says v'nelam mikol sheyoda. So when the pasuk says v'ne'elam and he forgot, so according to what the way that Rabbi is saying, right, he must have known it before. So my mashma, how is that the word v'ne'elam imply that you knew something before? So Amar Rava says midiloksiv v'hi aluma, because there's another way to write this. You could have said that it was hidden, right? The person did not know, and he committed the avera because he did not know, and then he found out. Then you can see that that's a circumstance where he did not know. So the word v'ne'elam means that it became unknown to him. So if you're going to understand that word to mean it became unknown, then that means he knew about it, and then it became unknown, and then he forgot about it, and then he became known again. So Amar le Abaye says, Elameata, if that's the way you're going to interpret the word v'ne'elam, it means that it was known, but you forgot about it, and then you knew about it again, then you're going to have a problem interpreting that word in another context. Gabi Sota. What about the Sota case, right? Here's a woman who the husband suspects of adultery, so he warns her not to hang out privately with this person again. And then he catches her hanging out with this person privately, so he's going to take her to the Beis HaMikdash. Pasuk says, V'ne'elam me'enei isha, right? That this was hidden from the eyes of her husband, right? He doesn't know what has occurred. Mikal, now, if your understanding of this means it became hidden from him. Mikal dehava yada meikara, that means that at some point he was perfectly aware that she was committing adultery, and now he forgot. Now he forgot that she was committing adultery, and that's why he's bringing her to the Beis HaMikdash, right? That's how you have to interpret it. We always interpret this pasuk as he never knew; it was hidden from him. He doesn't know what's going on. That's why he's bringing her to the Beis HaMikdash to find out what's going on. But if you're interpreting the word v'ne'elam to mean he once knew but then forgot, well, that means that the husband once knew that she committed adultery and then forgot about it. Now he goes, oh, I don't remember whether she committed adultery or not. I better go to the Beis HaMikdash in order to figure it out. Well, if that's true, right? Now, if the husband once knew and then he forgot about it, then the water shouldn't work. Why? Because if the husband knew that she committed adultery, that was a known thing, then he is prohibited from having relations with her anymore. Then he forgets. Well, now he's gone back to regular marriage. Well, that's not allowed. And so therefore, if he takes her to the Beis HaMikdash and uses the sota water, the pasuk says, we're going to see in a pasuk that the pasuk says that the water of sota works only if the husband is free from sin. Now, if the husband is not free from sin, in the sense that the husband, right, the husband is not free from sin because the husband knew that his wife committed adultery and stayed with her anyway, then the water's not going to work. So, because mi batkul and ma'il, would the water work? V'hatani, we learn in a brisa. V'nika ish mi avon, v'isha hi tisas avona. The man is clean from sin, right? She drinks the water. The man is clean from sin, and she gets and the woman, she carries the burden of the avera. Bisman, so we learn the drosh.
It's not that he did it purposely. He just forgot.
Okay, but he still did an avera. If you do it b'shogeg, it's still an avera. So if he does the avera b'shogeg, then the water is ruined.
Which I don't understand how that can happen, but anyway.
Right, it's also true, right? I'm also forgetful. I mean, that's a lot of Alzheimer's right there. I guess if you're having too many gimlets. The gimlet throwback. Good. Okay, so now, Bisman she'ha'isha menuka me'avon, hamayim bodkin es ishto. If the husband is clean from doing the avera, then the water works with his wife. Eina ish menuka me'avon, but if the husband is not clean from sin, eina mayim bodkin es ishto, then the water does not work. So then, okay. So therefore, the word v'ne'elam can't possibly mean that he knew and forgot. V'tu, and furthermore, gabe Torah dichsiv. What about the pasuk talking about the Torah? V'ne'elma me'enei kol chai u'me'ov hashamayim, talking about the Torah. It's hidden. It was hidden from the eyes of all living things and from the birds in the sky, and that which floats in the sky, meaning the angels. Nistra, it was held secret. Now, v'ne'elma means at once it was known, but then it got forgotten. That means that what? There was a human being who once knew all of everything in the Torah? That's not possible. The pasuk says, Lo yoda enush erka. A man can't possibly know the entire depth of breadth of the Torah. Elam Abaye, so Abaye says, the word v'ne'elam can't mean doesn't automatically imply he knew something from before. Chasava Rabbi, what Rabbi means to say is, Yedias base Rabo Shma Yedia. He says that being aware of something from what you learned the halachos in your Rebbe's house when you were in yeshiva, that's considered knowing, right? So therefore, if you once knew the halacha, Rebbe is learning it like this. If you once knew the halacha that you're not allowed to become tamei, and then you became tamei and you weren't aware of it, then you bring korban helam davar. That's what it means. Doesn't mean that you knew that you were tamei and then forgot about being tamei. You were a kid, you went to school, you learned this Gemara, and now you know about it. So Amalei Rav Papa Abaye. So Rav Papa says to Abaye, Ela de Katani, Ein Ben Yedia Betchila, V'yesh Ba Yedia Basof, Mi Ika, Deleis Le Yedia Base Rabo. 1 second, then the Mishnah says that you're only chayav the korban olav yored if you didn't know, if you knew at first, then forgot about it, and then knew about it again. But if you're telling me that this is talking about knowing the halachos about it in yeshiva at one point, well, then everybody went to yeshiva. So everybody knew at one point that you weren't allowed to be tamei and eating a korban. So how do you wind up ever having anybody that's not liable for a korban olav yored? Amar Le, he says, in mishkachas, of course you can find such a case. Betinok shenishba, somebody did not grow up from. Didn't grow up from, didn't go to yeshiva, doesn't know these halachos. And then he became tamei, he doesn't bring a korban olav yored. Somebody went to yeshiva and learned Mesechus Shevuos, so then that person can get a korban olav yored. Okay? So that's, he says, because Tina Shanishba Lebein Anachrim, somebody grew up amongst the non-Jews, so then that person is not liable for the korban olav yored. Okay, now let's talk about Yetzias Shabbos for a moment so we can clear our heads. Yetzias Shabbos Shtein Shin Arba. Okay, the carrying on Shabbos, there's 2 that are 4. Tanan Hasam, we learned over there in Mesechus Shabbos that it's Shtayim Shein Arba Bifnim Shtayim Shein Arba B'chutz. There's 2 that are 4 inside, 2 that are 4 outside. How is our Mishnah say there's 2 that are 4, period, when there should be 2 that are 4, which are 2 that are 4, which is a total of 4 that are 8? That's more. There's more in Shabbos than there are in our Masechta. Why is it here that it says 2 that are 4? The 2 low and there's no more. So Maishna Hasam, and then by Shabbos it's Titani Shtaim Shein Arba Bifnim, that there are 2 that are 4 that are inside, Ushtaim Shein Arba B'chutz, and 2 that are 4 outside. So the answer is Hasam over there to Iker Shabbos. There in Mishnah Shabbos, that's where we're really learning the halachos of Shabbos. So Tani Avos V'Tolados. It's going to teach me the main categories and the derivatives, meaning the case of the circumstance where one person picks it up and puts it down. Those are the avos, those are the main ones. What about the cases where one person picked it up and the other person put it down? Like the case where the owner picked up the object inside, the ani reached in, took it from the hand of the owner and brought it outside. Those are tolados, those are derivative circumstances, and those are not here. Hacha, in our circumstance, Iker Shabbos hu avos tani. The tolados lo tani. It's not going to bring all those detail cases. It's not important because we're not learning the details of halachos of Shabbos. So therefore, we didn't bring all the derivative cases where one person picked it up and the other person put it down or not. Those were not counted. My ninhu, what are the ones that are the derivatives and what are the main ones? The yitzias. The Torah says that taking out is always is the prohibition, right? That you're going to take from your camp and bring it to the Machane Leviyah. So that's going from inside to outside. So remember that we had in the Mishnah and Shabbos, there are those that go from inside to outside, and we had 2 cases where one person picked it up and brought it outside, one person picked it up from the inside, brought it outside, and then we had 2 cases where one person picked it up inside and the other person brought it outside, and then one person picked it up, put it outside, and the other person took it from him. Those are all the taking from inside outside cases. The taking from outside inside cases are not listed here because those are derivatives, because the Torah talks about taking out, not putting in. So Yitzias Tarti Havyan. So he says Yitzias, there's only 2. Well, taking out, there's only 2 times that you're liable for taking out, right? Where the poor person picks it up and takes it out, and when the Balabayas picks it up and takes it out. All the other cases where one person picks it up and the other person puts it down, you're not chayav. Those are rabbinic. We said you're putter avalaser. So now you're going to tell me, okay, well, we're counting those as well. Those we shouldn't count. We have to put these halachos of Shabbos similar to the cases of the tzaras. Just like all 4 cases of tzaras are cases that you are liable if you cut the blemish off. All the 4 cases have to be cases where you're liable. And if you've decided that you're only using the 4 cases where you're taking out 2 of them, you're not liable for. El Amar Rav Papa says, Hasam and Daker Shabbos, you're right, over there in Shabbos, so therefore that's the main part of Shabbos, Tani Chiyuvi Pturi. Therefore, over there, it tells you the cases where you're liable and the cases where you're not liable. Hacha, but here, Chiyuve Tani Pturi Lo Tani. Here, we're only going to tell you the cases that you're liable. That was the whole point of our mission here, is we're only telling you the cases that you're liable. So Chiyuve Minded, what are the cases that you're liable? Yitzias, taking out. So Yitzias Tarti, taking out is only 2 cases again. So Tarti Hu Dehavyan. So the answer is no, it's actually 4, because it's Shtaim Dotzah, 2 cases where you're taking out, Ushtaim Dachnas, and 2 where you're bringing it back in. So V'ha Yitzias Ketani, what do you mean? The Mishnah says that there are 4 times you're liable for taking things out on Shabbos. If you're going to include the cases where somebody picked something outside and brought it inside, then the Mishnah is not accurate. It's not taking out cases, it's taking in cases. So therefore, Ravashi says, Tana Hachnasin Nami Hotzah Karile. In the Mishnah, putting something inside is the same thing as taking something out. They use the same language. Hotzah means carrying from one rishus to the other. Mimai, how do you know that? Says Mishnah, so we're on Hayom Beis. Ditnan, we learned in a Mishnah. Hamotzi mi rishus l'rishus, if you take from one, right, and use the word hotzah, take out, from one domain to another. And it doesn't specify whether that's from the inside domain to the outside domain or the outside domain to the inside domain. Either way, that's called hotzah, you're chayav, you're liable. So, mi lo askinan de kama'ayel iyule, isn't this talking about a circumstance where you're also taking something from outside and bringing it inside? The kakari le hotzah. The Mishnah here is talking about and calling it hotzah, carrying, which is what we translate as. Okay, v'dilma kamapik mirishus hayachid l'rishus harabim. So maybe what it's talking about in this Mishnah is only talking about taking from the private domain to the public domain. Well, that can't be, because then the Mishnah would have just said, if you take it from the private domain to the public domain. Why does it just say if you take it from one domain to another domain? That is, that this prohibition of hotzah, that's the word we're going to use, is coming from one domain to another, even from outside to inside. The kakari le hotzah, and we're going to call it hotzah. But time of mai, why is it called hotzah? If it means bringing in, not only bringing out, because Tana, we learn, kol akiras chafetz mimakomo, anytime you pick something up from its place, hotzah karule. That's called hotzah. You're taking out from where it is. It's not a matter of taking it from inside to outside. It's just wherever it is, that's where we are taking it out. Amar Ravina, so Ravina says, Masnisid Nami Daika. Now that we've interpreted our Mishnah, we said our Mishnah is only talking about the cases where you are liable. Therefore, it's going to include both the cases where you are bringing it from outside to inside and from inside to outside, but it's going to be the cases where one person did it, so you're liable. You can see that from our Mishnah, because Daika, the Katani, Yitzius Shabbos, that taking out on Shabbos is Shtayim Shein Arba, which is 2 that are 4. Bifnim, which are inside, Ushtayim Shein Arba Bachutz, and there are 2 that are 4 on the outside. The Kamafmarish Hachnosa, and when the Mishnah in Masechah Shabbos talks about these cases, it says these are the 2 that are 4 cases of hotzah on the inside of bringing in, and 2 that are 4 of hotzah bringing out. Well, it even literally says bringing in is called hotzah. That's what the Mishnah says. Shma mina, so therefore it's clear what you said. That Rava Amar Rishuyos Ketani Rishuyos Shabbos Shtayim. So sorry, that's a Shma mina. Period. Rava Amar, Rava says, no, I will explain to you what our Mishnah is. He says, I've got a different explanation of our Mishnah altogether. He says, Rishuyos Ketani. He says, it's not hotzos. You shouldn't say, the Mishnah shouldn't say Yitzi. When the word says Yitzios, there are 2 that are 4 circumstances of hotzah. We don't want to use the word hotzah because hotzah means taking something out, and that was where we got all stuck. It means there are 2 Rishuyos, there's a private domain and a public domain. There's 2, which creates 4 circumstances in which you are liable, right? Now, we don't want to call the liability circumstance of taking from outside to inside hotzah, but now we're not. We call it 2 hotzahs. We're going to say 2 rishiyos. They're 2 domains, public domain, private domain, and there are 4 circumstances in which you can be liable. That's a good place to stop at the 2 dots.
Wow. It's really a transfer.
That's really a transfer.